Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Desmond Martin. I'm the program coordinator at NextWaveSTEM, and I am so glad to have each and every one of you on the line with us today as we discuss how to bring AI to your students. I am really excited because we're doing things a little bit differently. Usually, it's just me having the opportunity to speak to our educators. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we at NextWave STEM have had the really extraordinary opportunity to conduct free webinar sessions for educators here in Illinois and actually all over the United States and even as far as Saudi Arabia for educators who are looking for ways to engage students with hands-on STEM learning. Even during this really intense, really difficult pandemic. Today, we're veering off and we're changing tact a little bit. We've really been focused on our educators thus far during this pandemic, but we want to speak to administrators and principals about thinking more broadly, thinking more holistically, thinking about the future of education in emerging technologies with respect to STEM. So I'm here to speak with you today, but I also have our expert, Mr Srinath. He has the ability to really speak towards the expertise when we think about artificial intelligence and industry. I'll give him a more formalized introduction in just a little bit. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. We are in webinar mode today. That only means, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, that even though we know your camera ready, we know that you have your best tie on, the hairstyle is looking flawless, you have a beautiful golden voice. We actually won't be able to see your face or hear your voice. However, you are not voiceless during our session today. If you have any questions, our chat is open. If you have any comments, our chat is open. Our Q&A functionality is open as well. Go ahead and jump in and we will get those answered live on the air. But don't feel like you have to jockey for time and jockey for space. We are also recording this session and we are also going to be leaving some time towards the end for a Q&A session. So if there's something that you think of that's just not quite top of mind, you can either email me after our session today, or you can hold it, jot it down, and we can come back to it at the end of today's session during our Q&A. As I just mentioned as well, if you have to drop off, if we understand that your time is really valuable, for many of us, this is the first day of school. Welcome back to a very strange environment. Don't worry, we're recording and we will be sharing this recording for all of our registrants today. So feel free to share this recording with your colleagues, with your peers. We'll also be sharing the slide deck as a resource for you. Now that we've got all of that boring stuff out the way, we can go ahead and push forward because we know that the time is going to go really quickly and we have a decent amount to cover. We're going to, of course, welcome and introduce not only myself, but our guest expert today. We'll talk a little bit about NextWave STEM, who we are, what we offer, how we've grown, and really the ways we want to support your students. And then we'll really get into the meat of today's webinar. We'll talk about the current state of computer science education, kind of digging into some numbers. This is more of the nerdy section, thanks to the work of some large organizations. We'll talk about the impact of artificial intelligence and the needs that are being met, not just in terms of applications, but educationally. Their students and how they're going to fit into the future workforce. And then we'll talk about NextWave STEM's work in this field, our current curricular development, and ways in which you can build your programs to make artificial intelligence much more accessible to your students. So I know I usually ask for thumbs up in an in-person session to gauge whether or not we're good to go, but I'll take the silence in the chat for now as your assent that we can continue on. And I'm also going to really be excited to really engage our guest Madhav as he speaks more to our understanding of the way AI is being used currently and how AI will be used in the future. So with that in mind, our two goals. We'll discuss expanding computer science pipelining to introduce artificial intelligence instruction, and then we'll explore some upper level computer science education and think about the ways that they can have some impact on student outcomes. So I actually am going to invite our guest, Mr. Srinath, to open up the microphone and tell us a little bit more about yourself. He is the Artificial Intelligence Managing Director at Nexus Leap. Srinath, tell us, what do you do?
That's a loaded question, Desmond. Thank you for the introduction. This is really great. I think in general, this initiative, I think I'm very much behind. AI has taken over so many different industries by storm, and Nexus Leap is there to kind of take organizations through that process while providing value along the way. A lot of times you hear about AI and it's some kind of artificial neural network that's been created and it's really cool. It can identify cats or animals or something like that. But a lot of time in the business, it's so much, it's after many months of all this investment, you get something usable with AI. What Nexus Leap is really trying to do is as we implement AI, we also think about the business goals as we go along and what can we do to continue to add value along the way. You know, I have my computer science master's and really focused on supply chain and logistics with my bachelor's and my other experience. And I've been in consulting for a long time, and I really think the gap here is starting to widen in a good way because of the really the need for AI and its impact across industries. And Desmond, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to discuss and have a nice conversation with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I move on and talk about myself a little bit, I kind of want to throw a curveball at you there.
Sure.
Can you remember your first experience learning computer science?
Yes, I do. It was actually in high school. It was there was a computer science class I had, and it was so scary to me back then. You know, I did it back in high school. There was a class being taught, and it was only the smartest of the kids that could figure that out, right? And I remember like the closest I got to it was a program that I created on my calculator to help me through exams, right? I'm sure we've all been there. I played a lot of games on it, but I also created programs. And it was kind of interesting. That was my first foray into creating something that incorporated some of this logic that used to be something I had to derive and think of myself. We put it into this inanimate object, right? Very much, you know, very much limited by the rules, this logical kind of rules that we kind of give to them, right? And based on that, it'll come out with an outcome. And that was my first foray into computer science back in high school, and been fascinated ever since. I actually taught a computer science class as a TA back in college, and I've just been in the weeds of it for a long time now. I think it's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Manav. What we'll find is that your experience, and I've had similar experiences when we think about computer science. I actually didn't start learning computer science until my freshman year undergraduate. And it can be really intimidating. And what we find when we dig into the research about the state of computer science education in the US, but really getting granular to our home market here in Chicago, we think about the ways in which students have access to those courses and how they feel about those courses once they have access. Once again, I'm kind of putting the cart in front of the horse, but we'll definitely circle back around to that idea.
That's good.
Madhav has introduced himself. I, once again, am Desmond Martin. I am professionally trained as a mechanical engineer, and then made a shift kind of early on in my career, found that I had a passion for education and curriculum development. So I took kind of the practical application that I learned through my formalized training and really steered that towards curriculum development with a focus on emerging technologies. Not ed tech, even though emerging technologies kind of slides into that same thought process. At NextWaveSTEM, we are really focused on making those cutting edge technologies tangible for not only your students, but for your instructors. So I've really been very fortunate to be kind of at the ground floor of what we do at NextWaveSTEM, which is bringing some really, really high-tech concepts to the level at which your instructors and your students can engage and understand, with the key goal of seeing some tangible results when we think about tertiary education and when we think about career outcomes. So that actually kind of serves as a perfect segue. The Next Wave STEM story, without thinking about anything that's on our slide, is focused on big problems. And by big problems, I do mean massive problems. If we hear the word unprecedented one more time, many of us will lose our minds. Some of us will be quite happy to never hear the word COVID-19 again. But we are kind of stuck in that time where there is a globalized pandemic. And we at Next Wave STEM have seen and believed that global problems, pandemics, climate change, food shortages, the lack of potable water, those things that are really threatening all of us, even at different degrees, will require some technological solutions. To put it quite blunt, I believe that one of the children that we're educating right now, or groups of the children that we're educating right now, may very well invent the solution that saves the world. And then we'll have to keep inventing those solutions that save the world. It is critical that our students have access to STEM education. Critical that they understand emerging technologies. Why is it critical? Because the more comfortable they find themselves in STEM, the more of an identity that they find themselves engaging with STEM early on, the more proficient they are with tools and skills to be able to flourish in STEM fields and to be innovators and leaders in STEM fields, the closer and quicker we get to some of those solutions that make dramatic changes in so many millions of people's lives. This is the good work that we know that you believe in as well as educators, and that's the work we're engaged in at Next Wave STEM. That work has included a bunch of different offerings that I'll talk about a little bit later. But when we think about impact, when we think about where we have grown from in a very, very short 3 years, we started out of our founder, Udit Agarwal's apartment. And in that time, we've grown to partner with 80 plus schools in Illinois and beyond. We've got a few partnerships that are growing in Texas, and some prospects in Florida as well. But we've formed some massive partnerships. Chicago Public Schools, Glen Bauer Township High Schools, and University of Chicago Charter School System are just some of our partner schools that have helped us reach 8,500 students in the Metro Chicagoland area. And those courses have been hands-on with drones, robotics, 3D printing, and artificial intelligence. Both during and out of school time, we've done after school, we've supplemented the instruction in school, we've done workshops, and in the months, we've had to very, very quickly pivot to being able to conduct our courses both in person and virtually. But we're really fortunate because we've grown to a place where we're able to develop and license the curricula for sale. So we understand that a lot of times that we can't be there with you. We're not at a place right now where we are working outside of Illinois with instructors. We may be there in the future. But for those of you who really, really want to get the curriculum in your hands and really push your kids forward, we're selling and training on that curricula as well. So we've seen some rapid growth. So to the meat and potatoes, the really, really fun part. What is the state of computer science education? Really, really, really big question. And we're fortunate because there is decently fresh data on all 50 states, conducted with about 19,000 participants, participating principals. That means colleagues like you. That may also include some who are doing instruction. Thinking about some key metrics when we think about what computer science is doing. So a really great example is actually Illinois. Illinois is about 2 percentage points at most off from the US national average in all the metrics that we're going to see today. Plus or minus 2 percentage points. I'd like to call it extraordinarily average when we think about what these results mean. In almost all cases that you'll see today, the numbers for Illinois are almost exactly what you see in the United States generally. So, does computer science have a positive perception here in Illinois? Generally speaking, yes. Um, 82% of administrators, school principals, believe that people who do computer science make things that help improve people's lives. That's really good news. What it says to us at Next Wave STEM is that you believe what we do already, is that people who learn how to work with machines and give machines instructions to solve problems are making things that are good. And there are some really, really complex, interesting ethical questions when we think about the use of AI. But generally speaking, we are very excited for what's going to happen. 65% of Illinois administrators say that offering this computer science course is just as important as English, math, or your other core subjects. That is also really, really stunning and really, really encouraging to see. I think oftentimes there is this public perception that our educators, our administrators are not really invested in doing things that are new and exciting in education. When we see 65% of you saying that computer science is just as important as learning how to do basic arithmetic or learning how to communicate in an effective way in English, that bodes really well for the future. You're aligned with us when we think about our mission. And then 57% of our administrators say that most students should be required to take a computer science course, a requirement. There's this idea that introduction is a mandatory experience that students should have. At least that's what most of us believe. But just as there are really, really exciting numbers, things that make us hopeful, things that will hopefully get us going in the right direction, we have to ask this question: how exactly can we do better? There's always room for improvement. And there are some barriers when we think about computer science education right now, not even thinking about artificial intelligence. More than half, 51% of principals here in our home state of Illinois say that there are no teachers at the school who are qualified to teach any computer science course. That's millions and millions of our students who go to schools without an educator to actually provide them even a basic introduction to computer science. Um, Things have progressed. When I was a K to 12 pupil, it made lots and lots of sense that ed tech education had not progressed to a point where we had a pipeline of instructors familiar with computer sciences to teach it. Um, the opportunities to learn computer science at a younger age were much more limited than they are today. But in the year 2020, where we've seen big companies literally reshape our world, change the way in which we interact, redefine the ways in which we think about privacy and we think about communication. The fact that half of our students here in Illinois and half the students in the United States, K to 12, don't have a teacher qualified to teach computer science in their school at all is a huge, huge barrier. What we've also seen, really, really surprising, 33% of our principals really feel as though they do not have the necessary computer software to engage with learning about computer science. I am of the really hopeful opinion that this is not necessarily a lack of factual resources, but just a lack of connection towards those resources. That's a barrier that we also want to overcome as well. And that I'm really, really hopeful that this conversation today becomes a part of accomplishing. So the best overarching idea that we have here for Illinois, and something that we see mirrored in districts across the United States of America, are the actual opportunities to connect to instruction. I know I've got this question up here that says, are there student opportunities? And the answer is wholeheartedly yes. Half of Illinois schools, half of Illinois school principals say that they do offer at least one computer science class. Now, that is really heartening to me because sometimes all it can take is one class, one experience, stratified for our learners to really get the ball rolling, to spark an interest that leads to self-guided learning through supplementation, or to really drive an interest at the district level, at the parent level, even at the legislative level, to make some real changes when we think about resources that make this kind of education more accessible to students. Half of us have at least one course running. That means that we have the ability to grow. We see this opportunity for changes to be made. Very interestingly, a quarter of those courses are actually AP courses. That means that many of us have a pipeline that's already been developed that's in line with what the College Board has been doing. And this is not lightweight work. These are students developing full-fledged computer applications that are being judged in really rigorous, even if not necessarily ambiguous, but subjective terms when we think about effectiveness and capability. Students who are taking AP computer science courses are, I can't sugarcoat it enough, or I won't sugarcoat it all, I should say, are actually doing the work that real computer scientists, engineers, developers would do. And I think that connection is kind of hard to make sometimes, but your students who had the opportunity at the high school level to take those AP courses, who have grown through computer science basics, have learned HTML and JavaScript and Ruby on Rails and a bunch of other languages and learned how to apply them, are getting the opportunity to actually do the work before they do the work. And another interesting thing is that half of the courses, of all the courses that are offered here in Illinois, are considered introductory. That's the real growth opportunity. Is for our students who may have never done any kind of computer science before, there is the opportunity to grow really exponentially in the kind of computer science education they engage in. Really, the big takeaway point is that there is an ocean of difference between where our students start, where they stop, all the work that they might do in between, and then what happens next. We don't have great data yet on how many of our students who are taking those AP courses will go on and major in a STEM degree later on. We don't know how long those students who leave our AP courses will actually be retained in STEM fields that they choose, whether that's consistent with their area of study or whether that's their staying power, their attrition when we think about STEM fields and industry. That's something that continuously needs to change and grow, but we understand that the more we feed that lower level of STEM education, that introductory level, we can expect to see those outcomes at the higher strata continue to improve over time. So now the big question becomes this idea of AI need and impact. We can talk about what we like to see, but that might be putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit. What might actually be even more useful is to think about, what is AI doing right now? What can we expect from the industry? What can we point to when we think about our school board partners, when we think about our legislative partners, when we think about our parent partners, when we think about our students, preparing them for a future career? How can we move them closer to those really important expected outcomes? Madav, you were able to rejoin us. I know that internet snafus are par for the course in 2020. So welcome back, but you came back in on a really great moment.
It was almost on purpose.
Yeah, almost on purpose. We'll check that off as being on purpose, and we won't tell anybody else.
Sounds good.
How about that? I'll scrub that from the record. A great place to begin when thinking about AI need and impact is thinking, what exactly do we mean by AI? Many of us will have heard that word, have even a concept of what that word means from science fiction context. I have always loved Star Trek. This latest season where they brought back Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard, the whole season was dedicated to this idea of what it means for a machine to be alive. And some of our most prolific scientists and thinkers have really been consistently in question of what does it mean to make a machine more intelligent. I've thrown up this really general definition because I find that really simple definitions will serve as a linchpin to kind of reframe our thinking. But I want to kind of throw it over to Madhav because I know that you've done a lot of studying and a lot of thought around this. Because when we think about artificial intelligence, cybernetics, problem solving, deep learning, machine learning, the application towards robotics and even neural networks, we might not even understand at all what any of these ideas mean. What do we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Desmond, can you hear me? Just making sure.
We got you.
Okay, perfect. I think AI is one of those terms that we're either on the side of creating something, or we're on the side of completely just consuming it, right? And when you hear something that's artificially intelligent, I think up until now, the first few things that come to mind are like Terminator, right? Or iRobot, or something like that. Pop culture has taken this notion of artificial intelligence and really, gone on a different, completely different tangent with it, But what AI really is, though, at its core is taking what human beings do. How do we come up and make decisions, right? Encapsulating that into something else. So artificial intelligence is simply, it's almost like computer science that's kind of on its own, right? Like there's all these people that'll argue about AI and computer science. And honestly, you need computer science and math to create artificial intelligence. But in a way, even like a simple program written by a computer through computer science, right, is considered artificial intelligence. So you see all these different subsects of it, and it's just different kind of methods, right? If you go to machine learning, there's all these types of learning that a machine can do. If you go to robotics, you have planning, searching, and then you think about the Roomba. That's a robot. We've been using a Roomba for many years now, right? And it's cool because I think artificial intelligence can also be invisible. We have robotics, but what about Elasticsearch, right? What if you look on something and you find as you start typing, it starts recognizing what you're going to say. That's artificial intelligence as well. What about when Netflix tells you what show you should watch now, right? That's a recommender system. They're not throwing AI at you, but it's artificial intelligence. And I think that goes to show, if we go back in Desmond, if we think about jobs, right? We think about the need for AI, it's applicable in everything, right? All these different domains are being affected by artificial intelligence. And the only real way to get there is to try it. And it's cool nowadays because you talk about this, Desmond, right? Sometimes when human beings, we're in a situation where we really need something, we really rise to the occasion, and we're in a situation of COVID, and we've definitely risen. Education is not stopping. COVID's not having anything to stop education. It's definitely weird times, very true. But if we talk about what we can do with AI, it really starts with computer science. It starts with making sure that the way of thinking, the way of kind of giving kind of a very specific set of rules to a computer is kind of in place. Then how can we take it so that it learns how to do it on its own? And then kind of like looking at aspects of human psychology to say, how does it learn by mistakes? How does it learn doing this? How does it learn doing that? And get better over time, right? That's where it's really different. AI gets better over time based on the experiences it has, very much like a human being. A computer program gets input, does what it needs to do, but has the same output if you give it different inputs, right? Or it has different outputs, but it's kind of ingrained within that. AI is like a model that gets created. And if we think about all these different jobs, I think there's this whole notion of becoming a master at your craft, and I think it's very important to do that. And there's so many different crafts, right? You're a mechanical engineer by trade, Desmond, right? And I think as a craft, that's amazing. And what if you could do even more if you had, an integrated system of Desmond plus an AI, right? Or Desmond plus this tool that's now much easier to use because of artificial intelligence, right? that's where AI is really going to go. It's going to proliferate across all these different crafts. And I think when we start thinking about how we want to educate based on AI, it should really be based on all these different things with a mindset of taking something that can be reproduced and improved based on experiences. Does that make sense?
It certainly does, and it's really prolific when you think about this idea of the collaborative opportunities for artificial intelligence. Um, Something that you mentioned that has always piqued my interest is how artificial intelligence may actually change the ways in which students learn.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because even as adults, we aspire to be lifelong learners. You mentioned the way predictive search has changed a lot of the way in which we access information. There are whole YouTube shows and series for our entertainment that focus on, okay, here comes a celebrity and here's what Google predicted based on people's searches, and here are the top 15 or the top 20. And we would love for the celebrity to answer these questions.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing, it's kind of this public collaboration now happening alongside with the artificial intelligence. And we're seeing it start to filter into our other working areas. We're seeing emails now suggesting what the next line or the next turn of phrase should be for the text. Grammarly helps predict what I might say or how the tone of my text is coming forward. In the last week, we saw Amazon introduce a product that would actually analyze your tone of voice via a microphone and actually attempt to tell you your state of voice, your tone, your emotions, trying to intuit that kind of information. And I'm thinking on how that will continue to change the way our students learn. So kind of an off the subject question here, but in the world of artificial intelligence, where students will have to gather information and do things like type book reports or construct short stories or build in data sets, analyze tests for science class, how does artificial intelligence collaborate with students as they build out the learning process?
Definitely. The first thing that comes to mind is more of like a personalized tutor. You know, imagine if you're a teacher and you have this knowledge base, and you have this knowledge base, and you have all this curriculum and tests, quizzes, everything. But each student learns at its own pace. Each student has different strengths and weaknesses. And how can you as a teacher give every single person personalized attention? It's possible, but it becomes very much dependent on that teacher now. And it's not a scalable, sustainable model. What if there's an ability for an entity, artificially intelligent entity, that could learn a lot of the same things that you are teaching objectively, but also on top of that, understand how each particular student's improving and can offer personalized advice for each student? You know, that's the first area. And I think this is where NextWaveSTEM, there's so many ways and opportunities for you guys to go, because there's so much of that that's already available. You have all this data ready. You can offer this personalized approach to each student. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is also the mindset shift, right? Repetition is still very important. This is where, I used to be bad about this in school. I would never show my work when I do a math problem, you know? But I recognized eventually that that's how you learn. You have to kind of repeat things over and over and over again, and you end up getting better at things, right? I think this is where the mindset from a student will change, where, well, some of the things won't change, right? You still have to do what you have to do, but you have additional tools at your disposal now, you know? So from a student perspective, you have a personalized tutor potentially, right? But there's also all the subject material that's gonna start increasing at it's just going to grow so much faster, you know? And as a student, I think AI is a perfect example of something that's going to grow so quickly that as they continue learning, there's more to learn, right? Like the concept of being a lifelong learner, I think is instilled very early because of AI.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that insight. I think you're hitting the nail on the head when we think about the ways in which students are much more digital natives than they've ever been. And this idea that they can work together with AIs, personalized learning experiences. The phrase that we like to use at NextWaveSTEM very often is that we want to transform our students from just being consumers of technologies to be creators. And the artificial intelligence, this entire field opens up the opportunity for students to be collaborators with their technology. It's really, really exciting. So big questions now, big questions for the future that I think you'll really be able to speak to really well here. And they come back to this idea of jobs. It's one thing to say, okay, I would love for my students to learn this technology, this really, really engaging way of interacting with machines in the world around them. But what is it going to do for us? What is it going to do for them? How is it actually going to change the world? So two big, big questions here. And take your time or be assured I can pull things out of you. What are some ways that the jobs of today, current workers' jobs, are going to change? How will those roles change, and how will they continue to shift because of the way that artificial intelligence is evolving? I think might be able to speak to really what you're seeing with your client space. And then secondly, we're going to ask you to polish up that crystal ball. What are those jobs that don't even exist yet that you can see existing because of artificial intelligence?
Definitely. So the very first one, I like this picture you have here as a prop. I've been in the supply chain space for a long time. I think personally, this is a good way to look at it, because as you can see, this specific robot, it's not a human being. You don't look at this and say, this is my friend, right? Or this is an entity that I can relate to. It's a partner, it's something that will help you. And I think workers' jobs and roles will change. The mindset has to change. It can't be, I'm going to go and I'm going to put this many hours a week and I'm going to come out of it. I'm going to keep doing it because this is what I've always done. Rather, it really should be around impact-based outcomes. So many of us have mindsets that are around, well, if I had more time, I could give so much more, right? I'm stretched so thin, but if I had more time, I could do so much. I could provide so much more value. So AI will become the Batman or the Robin to your Batman, right? This is where, as a crime-fighting duo, right, you're much better off than just having just one kind of very specific approach to things. A warehouse worker, right, will now be much more efficient at his or her job because she has things like robots and conveyors and automated systems to help her through the process, right? That's number one. And you want me to follow up with anything there, Desmond, for number one?
I actually would. I know that we've talked about the logistics space, and you're right. We've seen rapid transformation. When we think about the largest logistics player right now,
I wonder who that is.
Named. But we're seeing the ways in which artificial intelligence are driving things like robots, and now even within the last week, the FAA has opened up drone delivery options to many companies. Outside of logistics, where else do we see AI making an extreme impact?
I mean, really everywhere. Personally, I think conversational agents are really cool, right? We have Alexa, Google Home. Oh, never mind. My Alexa just popped up.
Well, you didn't set off my Google Home, so that I just did. So
this is where, once again, this is a partner, right? There's a concept in human-computer interaction where the enjoyment that you have in doing a task directly correlates to the gap between the intention you have and the action you have to take, right? So like, if I intend to turn the lights off, I'm gonna enjoy this. Well, I mean, the whole process is gonna be better off if I can just, think it, right? But I can't. If I think it, okay, it won't work. Okay, we're not quite there yet. But if I just say it, if I tell someone to do it, it'll turn the light off for me, right? So I think that level of partnership is so cool. Right. We'll see a lot of that happening. And the ability for artificial intelligence to to learn on different domains, right? Learn different problems, do different things, and help out in so many different ways where it's not quite a human being, right? A human being is just really way more complicated in its in our problem solving abilities and how we think about things. Artificial intelligence is not quite there yet. There's a term for it called artificial general intelligence, and I think that's outside of our lifetime. That's a separate topic, but that's what I think, right? That's my guess there. But in the near future, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it really would be a partner for us. It'll be a way for us where it's a force multiplier for us. So instead of just us and AI.
Might have. I just lost you.
There you go. Am I back?
Can you hear me? Yep, I got you.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, let's pivot to that second question there. The jobs of the future, and we can even pivot back to when you think about logistics or be much more generalized, because we're going to see tasks and roles change in the way that we collaborate change. We're going to see that person who was walking miles and miles and miles, moving boxes, or the person who was even operating the delivery vehicle, those tasks may fall into the hands of our AI. What have we now been freed up to do? What are the new jobs that are coming to take the place of those old ones that are going away?
Yeah, this is where it gets very different, right? It gets very different from industry to industry. The main concept remains, right? This is where there's two areas that are going to be more focused on. The first is when AI becomes more of a commonplace kind of activity, kind of commonplace tool, the input data into artificial intelligence is going to need to be carefully examined, right? This is where the bias that we have based on historical data can very easily propagate into AI. So there's going to be a lot more jobs around governing the input into that data so that, by chance, AI doesn't learn from our mistakes as human beings, right? That's so easy to do because we don't think about that. It's historical, it's already happened, or we don't think about needing to change it, In this case, it's really important that input data and whatever we do in different domains, we verify, we look through it, ensure that diversity is maintained, right? Ensure that the domain is properly represented. And there'll be more jobs to do that, and this is where linguists come in, right? Psychologists come in, there's mathematicians. It's cross-functional. You can't just have a computer scientist do this. Right. From an education standpoint, that means that there's so many different types of AI specialists that now we need to prepare, right?
Absolutely.
The other side of it's the output. What will never change is, the world changes so quickly, right? So what doesn't change is human beings need to be there to kind of adapt to that world changing as well. And whatever AI comes back with, we need to supervise, right? There's a layer of supervising what goes into it, but also supervising what comes out of it and helping it learn. We're going to be AI's teachers, right? Mm-hmm. And as educators, I'm sure you understand the importance of teaching, right? There's mistakes that we have to make sure we constructively address. And then whatever we do well, we want to make sure we also incentivize. AI is very similar to a toddler, right? As it goes through its learning, it's getting better and better. It needs to also be properly supervised in that manner.
Absolutely. Well, that's really helpful. Even when we think about what that may mean for educators in the classroom in the future, supervising right. Both the input, so making sure that their prior assumptions about students or even student populations don't skew the kind of data that we're getting on the outset or from the output when we think about those personalized tutors for teachers. But then we also think about the output and how we take the insights that we have as human beings, understanding developmental psychology or understanding instructional models, to really point our students in the right direction that the information coming out of our virtual co-laborers can't give us. Manav, thank you so much for bringing your expertise. We know that you're constrained on a client meeting, so we will definitely let you go. But thank you so much just for your insights.
Absolutely, Desmond. Anyone on the call, if you want to connect with me and ask me any more questions, more than open to it. Desmond, thank you so much for having me on, and good luck with everything.
Definitely. And we'll make sure that as a part of that follow-up information, we will connect Madhav's connection information so that anyone who wants to reach out can reach out. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
So now for our educators, we've talked really high level, thinking about what the future holds with respect to your students' prospects working with AI. We understand that there's going to be a world that exists in which our students will be co-laboring with AI, co-learning using artificial intelligence, that many of them will need to understand how the artificial intelligence works, understand data and understand their own biases. How do we get from the place that we are now, where we are doing a halfway decent, and I do mean halfway decent job of making these opportunities available for our students to learn basic computer science, how to input and output to these machines? How do we go from here to there? Well, a great place to begin is with NextWaveSTEM in our new artificial intelligence course, Creation and Evaluation of Advanced Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence. It's 10 lessons and they're designed for students who have some basic experience with Python. We're thinking of our high school students. NextWaveSTEM offers K through 12 courses in drones, robotics, and 3D printing as well. But this new offering for artificial intelligence is really, really special because it's our first course that isn't designed for what we might think of a complete neophyte. It's completely open source using Python. That means that a lot of those constraints, a lot of those barriers that we think about with respect to having access to the right kind of materials and software, it's completely overcome. Some of us may be familiar with obtaining Scratch licenses for our educators, or making sure that all of our educators are outfitted and ready to go with proprietary 3D printing software like what you might find with MakerBot. Artificial intelligence has grown to the space now where our teachers are able to get into it with no actual investment in terms of software keys and licenses. That's really, really important. Equally important, we've found, is that it's platform agnostic. You don't have to be worried about whether or not your school is a Mac school or a Google school or a Windows school. It works regardless of your actual platform. As long as you've got an internet browser and the ability to connect to the internet with your school, as many of us have now pivoted and made available to our students. That means that they're able to access the course, the lessons, the material, and the coding. What's also really important is that we have an instructional model that supports real world learning goals. That means that we are aligned with Next Generation Science Standard, ISTE, Common Core Math. That's critical. It's critical that our students are able to effectively assess and point towards where their students are growing in their skills in a really, really robust way, but also doing that work while learning about an emerging technology. And with this course, we're also making training available on the course available through NextWaveSTEM. That means that for our teachers who have some experience with coding, who have some experience with Python, or for our teachers who have no experience with coding and no experience with Python, we are a resource for you through training, through professional development, through ongoing support. This becomes critical to our teachers' success. We see in the data that many school districts feel like there is inadequate resources put towards the professional development for their teachers to be successful. NextWaveSTEM is a resource for that. So how can NextWaveSTEM help more generally, not just with respect to computers and artificial intelligence, but with respect to any other STEM need that you might have? Well, first and foremost, it's actually by doing what you're doing right now. Since the last week of March, we've been running free webinars, free professional development sessions, and we will continue free professional development sessions. The calendar for those professional development sessions has today as the last session on date, but by the end of the week, there will be sessions running into the future. So I'm really, really excited because we've been hearing what our teachers, our educators, our administrators have been focused on and what they've been going through for the last 6 months. Our goal with those sessions is to make sure that there are tangible skills that teachers can apply in the classroom, using the tools to be more effective, especially when they've had to learn a whole new set of tools, an expansive skill set that allows them to meet their students where they are, especially if where they are is virtually. It is a brand new space for many of us. It's a brave new world. NextWaveSTEM is going to be there to continue to support that space. But NextWaveSTEM is also really, really excited to continue to roll out and expand our school partnerships in the products that we currently have on offer. That means hands-on experiences and virtual experiences as well. And those experiences can be with or without the equipment. The goal is really to make sure that your students do have that opportunity to learn how to build robots, to learn how to fly drones, to learn how to operate and design using a 3D printer, and then to make those connections to future STEM outcomes. Students going on to the tertiary level of education, majoring in STEM fields, apprenticeships, working in industry, supervising and managing artificial intelligence systems instead of being at the whim of artificial intelligence systems. Those online and in-person courses are the first step to get towards that goal. And then we also really want to focus on the fact that our courses, the licensed courses, the courses that are trained by us and taught by you are seamlessly flippable, seamlessly adaptable according to your situation. And we know that's really, really important. We do not understand what the future holds with respect to virtualized learning because there's still, even 6 months in, so very little that we know about the nature of our globalized pandemic. Flexibility is key. It's something that your students have been learning and growing into. They're going to continue to learn and grow into and struggle in. It's something that our teachers are learning and growing into. But we're going to continue to learn and grow together. And that means having the ability to take the material that we're learning virtually and move it into a hybrid where there may be some days where we're in school and other days where we're virtual. It may mean having material that we can teach completely virtually and then making sure that that works, that we get to those expected learning ends and accessible learning ends. It means having material that we're able to teach in person and then maybe have to go remotely. We don't know the future, but we want to be doing the best that we can to provide a solution for you that allows you to adapt. So I know that we've hit you with a fire hose of information. Want to pause with the few moments that we have left for any questions that you might have. The chat is open, the Q&A is open. Now is a great chance for you to drop in any questions that you have. I'll pause for a moment and let those questions fly in. And as those fingers are going furiously on those keyboards, just want to say that don't worry if you are still processing our presentation today or just have questions for later on. You are more than happy, or we are more than happy to receive that email with that really special asked question. Well, I love questions. I love receiving emails. I love hearing from other educators. And towards that end, we'd love to connect with you. NextWaveSTEM is available on all major social networks. We are on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We are not on TikTok. I neither tick nor do I talk. And I've heard that there's a little bit of a snafu with our federal government right now with respect to TikTok. We may be TikToking again in the future. But if you are looking for a personal connection, my email address is really, really easy. Desmond at nextwavestem.com. Love to get into the weeds with you some more, or if you're interested in learning more about how we can bring these partnerships to your school, I will connect you with our school partnerships manager, Jared McCarthy, and we can have a much more robust conversation. Oh, had a good question coming here from Mary. When working with Arduino and GitHub, found lots of bugs. How do we deal with that? Mary, the short answer to that question is to check our resources and check our sources. What we can find is because GitHub is an open source community and there are creators, much like you, who are doing the best they can, the code isn't always clean. Look for those developers who are publishing code in GitHub, who, one, not only have lots of practice and have a large code base and an active code base of contributors and edits being made in GitHub, but who are very, very well respected in the space. I'm a big fan of avoiding bugs when we think about downloading our code and applying to Arduino, by making sure that I'm going to the most trusted source that I can. I know that's kind of generalized, and we almost never find things malicious that end up into our code when we think about pulling from projects on GitHub. But what we do find is that there are people who are working, doing the best that they can with limited time and limited resources. Educators also have limited time and limited resources. So we don't want to put you in a position where you have to continue to debug and go through your code and see what's going wrong. That's a learning experience for our students, but if we have some different educational goals in mind, then going to the most trusted source and resources that we can via GitHub becomes our best bet. Really, really good question there. And if we have any other great questions, we would love to see those questions. Once again, my email is desmond@nextwavestem.com. We thank you. We thank you so, so much for joining us today. Thank you for the opportunity for us to share a little bit more about what we're hopeful to see in the artificial intelligence space, especially with our K-12 students. Thank you so much for your continued passion for our students, that you continue to innovate, that your instruction continues to evolve, that you are really pushing it forward when we think about what our students deserve and how they can learn. We know what you know, that our students are valuable, that they're treasures, and that they will eventually save the world. So as we continue to partner together, we're looking forward to connecting with you in the future via our webinars or via just our emails. Look out for us, and we will be hoping to see you. In the meantime, stay safe, educate students well, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.